My brother raised his beer and said, "At least I gave Mom and Dad grandkids. What have you given them? A spreadsheet?" The table laughed. Not the polite kind. The kind that means everyone already agreed before you walked in the room. I was 31 years old, sitting at my parents' kitchen table in Columbus, Ohio, the same table I'd grown up at, the same chipped corner from when my brother backed into it, moving his old PlayStation downstairs. I had driven 2 hours from Cincinnati for this. I had brought the wine. I had helped my mom set the table, fold the napkins, slice the bread. I set my fork down very slowly. At least I paid the mortgage so they still have a table to put grandkids under. Nobody laughed at that one. My brother's name is Dex. I've been calling him that since we were kids, short for Dexter. And he is 35 years old, has 2 children, a wife who goes by Lori, and considers herself a lifestyle content creator, and a job he describes as in between things right now. He has been in between things for 4 years. He lives 12 minutes from my parents. He shows up for Sunday dinners and holidays and takes all the credit for being present, which is easier to do when someone else is quietly paying for the presents to be possible. That someone is me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. From the outside, my life in Cincinnati looks fine. Steady, even. I'm a senior data analyst at a healthcare software company. I have my own apartment on the 4th floor of a building, with a rooftop garden I use maybe 3 times a year. I cook on Sundays, I run on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I call my mom every Wednesday. I have a cat named Brick, who was supposed to be a temporary foster situation 22 months ago. What you wouldn't see from the outside is where about 1/3 of my take-home pay goes every month. It started 5 years ago, right after my dad's back surgery. He couldn't work for 6 months. He drove for a logistics company, and lifting was part of the job, and my mom was part-time at a daycare, and that income alone didn't stretch far enough. I picked up the mortgage payments for 3 months. I figured 3 months. Back on track by spring. Spring came. Then another spring. Then another. My dad did go back to work, eventually, but lighter routes that paid less. My mom dropped to 1 day a week at the daycare because of her knees. And somewhere in that stretch, my brother and Lori bought a minivan they couldn't really afford and had their second kid, and my parents' expenses just kept quietly exceeding what they brought in. And I kept quietly making up the difference. I'm not listing all this to sound virtuous. I'm listing it because I genuinely did not let myself add it up for a long time. The individual amounts felt manageable. 400 here, 800 there. The mortgage 1 month when things were tight, then a second month, then a third, until the 3rd month became just the system. It was easier to keep going than to stop and look at the total, the way you avoid certain emails in your inbox, because you already know what they say. I knew what they said. I just didn't want to know the number. The dinners were always the same. My mom made pot roast or baked chicken. My dad sat at the head of the table and talked about whatever game was on the weekend or something he'd read online. My brother showed up late, usually with one of the kids on his hip, and everyone softened the moment he walked in, the way a room temperature shifts when someone opens a sunny window. Lori sat beside him, usually on her phone for some portion of the meal, sometimes mentioning her content numbers, sometimes not. I sat across from my brother. I helped with the dishes afterward. I drove 2 hours home. I don't remember exactly when I started dreading the drive down. Somewhere in the 3rd year of the arrangement, maybe. The drive itself is fine. Mostly highway, pretty flat, good radio coverage. But I'd find myself gripping the wheel on the way there, rehearsing things I never said. And on the way back, I'd decompress in silence. No music, just the road and the particular kind of tired that isn't physical. I told myself this was family. This was what you did. My parents hadn't had it easy, and they'd gotten unlucky with timing, and I was the one with the stable income, so it made sense that I carried more. I told myself a lot of things. Last October, my parents threw a small party for their anniversary, 35 years. My mom had been excited about it for months, mentioned it on almost every Wednesday call. I took the day off work, drove down the evening before, helped my mom rearrange the living room and hang some string lights. I brought a gift, a framed photo I'd had reprinted and restored from their wedding, one where they're both laughing at something off camera. My mom cried a little when she saw it. The next afternoon, people arrived. My parents' neighbors, a few old friends. My aunt from out of town, my brother and Lori and the kids. It was fine for a while. Nice, even. My parents were happy. The string lights looked good. Then, after the cake, my brother and I ended up in the kitchen at the same time, refilling drinks, and Lori came in behind him and she said, mostly to my brother but not lowering her voice at all, "You know your sister could probably afford to help more with stuff like this if she ever stopped spending money on herself." I didn't move. My brother made a sound that wasn't quite agreement and wasn't quite pushback either. The Switzerland of sounds. Then he looked at me, and I think he was going to say something neutralizing, something like "she doesn't mean." But Lori was already going, the way she does when she gets started, about how I had freedom and no real expenses, and no kids, no husband, nothing tying you down. And wasn't it nice to be so independent? And then she said, "Some of us are doing the real work of building a family." The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere in the living room, someone was telling a story that made several people laugh. I looked at my brother. He looked at the floor. I said, very quietly, "The real work. Right. Is that why I've been paying Mom and Dad's mortgage for the last 4.5 years? Lori blinked. "What?" "The mortgage," I said, "and the car insurance, and the property taxes last year when things got tight, and Mom's dental work in June because the insurance didn't cover it." I kept my voice flat. "I've been doing that, while building my independent little life with no real expenses." My brother looked up. His face had changed. "I didn't know," he started. "Yes, you did," I said, not unkindly, just as a fact. "You knew something was helping them stay in that house. You just didn't ask what." Lori said, "That's not fair. We have the kids. We have our own." "I know," I said. "You have a lot going on. So do I. I just also have the mortgage." I walked back out to the living room. I did not make a scene. I smiled at my parents' neighbor who wanted to show me pictures of her new garden. I had another piece of cake. I helped my mom clean up when people started leaving. I kissed my parents goodnight and drove home. But something had shifted. Some weight I'd been carrying so long it felt structural, like a load-bearing wall inside me had developed a crack. I could feel it on the drive back. The hum was different. That night I opened my laptop and I did what I had been avoiding for 5 years. I made a spreadsheet. Not because I'm a data person, though I am, because I needed to see it. I needed the number to be real, to exist somewhere outside my own head where I could look at it directly. It took me about 2 hours to pull everything together. Bank records, old emails, the folder I'd made when I first started tracking transfers, and then stopped looking at after 6 months. When I was done, I sat back and stared at the screen. $67,000. Give or take, over 4.5 years, between the mortgage contributions, and the insurance, and the taxes, and the medical bills, and the one time I wired them $3,000 in cash when my dad's truck needed a new transmission, and he said he just needed a little help just this once. $67,000. I was 31 years old. That was the down payment I didn't have on a condo I hadn't been able to buy. That was the savings account that was smaller than it should be. That was 4.5 years of quiet. I didn't sleep much that night. But when I did, I dreamed about nothing at all, which felt like its own kind of message. The next morning, I called my bank and asked what it would take to modify the standing transfer I'd set up to my parents' account. The woman on the phone was efficient and pleasant. It was easy, easier than I expected. I sat with my coffee for a long time after I hung up. Then I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring, the way she always does, and said, "Sweetheart," before I'd even said hello, and for a moment I almost couldn't do it. She has a particular warmth in her voice, my mother, something genuine, and it makes it hard to be clear-eyed about the whole picture. I asked how she was. She said fine, tired, left foot had been bothering her. Then I said, "Mom, I need to talk to you about the money." Silence. "I've been covering the mortgage and a lot of other things for almost 5 years," I said, "and I can't keep doing it. Not at this level. I'm not saying I'm disappearing. I'm saying this needs to change." Her voice went carefully neutral. "What do you mean, change?" I mean, I've been carrying this alone and nobody's ever talked about it out loud. Not once. Not what it actually costs me, not whether it's sustainable, not what the plan is for it to end. I took a breath. I need there to be a plan. Or I need to stop. This is because of what Lori said. This is because of what's been true for 4.5 years, I said. Lori just made me stop pretending I was fine with it. My mom went quiet in a way that meant she was crying, or close to it. I know all her silences. I'll talk to your father, she said finally. Okay, I said. I'd like to all talk together, actually. 2 weeks later, I drove down to Columbus again, not for Sunday dinner. My parents had asked my brother to come too. He showed up with his usual 10-minute delay, without Lori, and sat at the kitchen table with a coffee he hadn't offered to make for anyone else. My father spoke first, which surprised me. He said, "We know we've leaned on you. We know it wasn't fair to make it your whole responsibility. Your mother and I talked about it, and we're not going to pretend an otherwise." I hadn't expected that. I hadn't let myself expect anything, because expectation had always cost me something in this room. I said, "Thank you for saying that." Then my brother said, "I didn't know how much. I'm serious. I knew you helped, but I didn't know the number." "I know," I said. "You should have told us," he said. "You should have said something sooner." And there it was. The thing that always happens, the gentle reframe where my silence becomes the problem. "I did say something," I said, keeping my voice even. "I said it at the party. I'd been saying it by paying the bills for 4.5 years. The signal was there. Nobody asked." He looked down at his coffee. "I'm not here to fight," I said. "I'm here because this needs a real plan, not another month of me just handling it. Dad, what does the actual shortfall look like every month? Let's put it on the table." My dad looked surprised, like math at the kitchen table was a new concept, but he got up and found the folder where he kept bills, the physical paper kind, and we went through it. Together. For the first time. It took about 40 minutes. My brother asked questions I hadn't heard him ask before. My mom made more coffee. By the end, we had something that looked like an actual plan. My parents were going to look into downsizing their car. My dad was going to pick up weekend shifts for a local hardware chain that had been asking him anyway. And my brother said he and Lori could cover the mortgage contribution at half of what I'd been doing, starting next month. I did not hug him, but I thought about it. Before I left, I sat for a moment in the kitchen while my mom was putting dishes away. She came over and put her hand on my shoulder without saying anything. Her hand is small and warm, and I have known the weight of it my whole life. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have asked. We all should have asked." "Yeah," I said. "You should have." She didn't argue with that. That was new. On the drive back to Cincinnati, I didn't grip the wheel. I had the music on, something upbeat and low stakes, and I watched the highway unspool ahead of me in the late afternoon light. I thought about the $67,000. It wasn't coming back. That was just true, and I was making a kind of peace with it, the same way you make peace with a scar. Not erasing it, just letting it be part of your skin. What I was keeping, though, was everything going forward. My next raise, the savings account I was going to rebuild. The condo fund I was actually going to start, for real, with a real timeline. The trip I'd been postponing for 3 years because something always came up, some bill, some month that was tight for them, and therefore tight for me. I was going to book the trip. When I got home, Brick was sitting in the windowsill looking unimpressed by my return, the way he always does, and then came to investigate my shoes, the way he always does, and I stood in my own hallway for a moment and just breathed. It didn't feel triumphant. I want to say that clearly. It felt like something quieter than that. Like the moment after you've been carrying something heavy for a long time and you finally put it down, not dramatically. Just. You set it on the floor and your arms straighten out and you feel the blood returning. My mom called the next Wednesday, same as always. We talked about her foot, about a show she'd been watching, about nothing in particular. She asked how I was doing. "Good," I said, and I meant it in a way I hadn't meant it in years. I booked the trip the following Sunday, Portugal. 2 weeks. September. I haven't told them yet. I'm going to, on the next call because I don't want to be someone who keeps things small and close to her chest just because that's what she learned to do. But for now, I'm just going to sit with this. The knowledge that I can spend 2 weeks in another country on my own money without calculating what it costs someone else. If you've ever been the one in your family who just quietly handled things while everyone else assumed you always would, I want to know. Tell me where you're listening from. Tell me when you finally put it down. Because that moment, that specific, ordinary, unglamorous moment when you just stop, I think it changes something permanently, and I don't think we talk about it enough.